I thought love would make the age gap disappear. I used to believe that age was just a number people hid behind when they didn't understand something. That's what I told myself anyway. It sounded mature, reasonable, progressive. I didn't think the age gap would matter. Not when we laughed the same way. Not when conversations stretched past midnight. Not when I felt more understood than I ever had before. I didn't realize back then that understanding someone isn't the same as meeting them where they are. I met them during a strange, in-between phase of my life. I was old enough to feel like I should have everything figured out, but young enough to still be improvising most of it. My days were busy but directionless. My future felt like a list of vague ideas rather than a plan. They were the opposite. Calm, established. Their life had structure, routines, responsibilities, stories with clear beginnings and endings. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence of someone who had already survived the chaos I was still standing in. At first, it was nothing. Just talking. Work-related at first, then slowly personal. The kind of conversations that start innocently and end with you realizing you've said more than you intended to. They asked thoughtful questions. They remembered details. They listened without interrupting. That alone felt intoxicating. People my age listened to respond. They listened to joke, to relate, to move on. This felt different. This felt like being taken seriously. When I noticed the attraction, I ignored it. When they noticed it, they pretended not to. We danced around it with politeness and restraint, like acknowledging it would somehow make it inappropriate, which, deep down, I knew it already was. When it finally happened, it didn't feel reckless. It felt inevitable. We didn't announce it to anyone. We didn't define it right away. It existed in small moments. Coffee after work, long walks, conversations that felt too personal to be casual and too gentle to be dangerous. The age difference stayed abstract. It was just a fact, like eye color or height. Something you acknowledged once and then stopped thinking about, until the world started thinking about it for us. The first real crack appeared the night I mentioned them to my friends. Not dramatically, just casually. Someone asked how we met. Someone else asked their name. And then, inevitably, someone asked how old they were. I answered honestly. The room shifted. No one said it was wrong. No one told me to stop seeing them. They just exchanged looks, quick, subtle glances that said more than words ever could. Later, one friend pulled me aside and asked, gently, if I was okay. Not happy. Not in love. Okay. I brushed it off. I said all the right things. That I was an adult. That I knew what I was doing. That it felt healthy. I believed that. Mostly. When I told my partner about it, they smiled in that calm, knowing way of theirs. People judge what they don't understand, they said. And I nodded, relieved to have someone so certain when I wasn't. At the beginning, the age gap felt like an advantage. They knew how to communicate. They didn't play games. They were emotionally available in a way that felt refreshing compared to the chaos I was used to. But slowly, without me realizing it, their certainty started replacing my own. They always chose the restaurant because they knew better places. They planned weekends because they were better at logistics. They gave advice, constantly, and I accepted it because it sounded wise. Whenever I disagreed, they never raised their voice. They just explained, patiently, thoroughly, until I felt silly for thinking differently. You'll understand when you're older, they said once, laughing softly. I laughed too. But something about it stuck. They talked about my future like it was flexible clay. Something that could be molded, redirected, delayed. They talked about their own future like it was concrete. Whenever I spoke about big dreams, moving, changing careers, starting over somewhere new, they listened, smiled, and reminded me how unrealistic it all was. "You're romanticizing uncertainty," they said. "I've already done that phase." I started noticing how often my life was described as a phase. They didn't forbid anything outright. That's what made it so confusing. They just reacted. A sigh when I went out late, a comment about my friends being irresponsible, a raised eyebrow when I dressed too young, too loud, too much. Slowly, I adjusted. Not because they asked me to, but because disappointing them felt worse than disappointing myself. The relationship didn't implode. It eroded. I became quieter, more careful. I stopped bringing up ideas that would be dismissed. I filtered my personality into something more acceptable, more aligned with their already established life. The moment of clarity didn't come during a fight. It came during a quiet evening, sitting on their couch, surrounded by furniture chosen years before I existed in their world. I mentioned, almost jokingly, that maybe I'd live abroad someday. They laughed, softly, automatically. "You'll grow out of that," they said. And suddenly, I understood everything. They loved me, but not as an equal moving forward alongside them. They loved me as I was right now. Young, adaptable, temporary. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, realizing how small my world had become, how much of myself I had compressed to fit into someone else's certainty. When I finally brought it up, the conversation was calm, almost tender. They admitted they worried about me changing, about waking up one day and wanting a life they couldn't or wouldn't follow. I realized then that the age gap had always been there, not in years, but in direction. We weren't growing together. We were growing apart at different speeds. Leaving felt like failure at first, like I was throwing away something stable for something uncertain. But uncertainty started to feel like freedom. Now, looking back, I don't think either of us was a villain. But I've learned this. Feeling protected isn't the same as being respected. Being guided isn't the same as being heard. And love, no matter how genuine, can still quietly ask you to disappear. I don't regret the relationship, but I do regret how long it took me to realize that growing up shouldn't mean shrinking to fit someone else's finished life.